So I always studied psychology because I wanted to understand the people around me, the people I grew up with. Like everyone, I found it confusing. And over the years, I was disappointed by the psychology I had learned. My students didn't seem very motivated. My own children didn't seem very motivated. And then when I discussed it with my colleagues in the social sciences, I was shocked to discover that a lot of their children were not very motivated either. So I thought, well, what I learned in the social sciences is really not a very good explanation of life. So I looked and looked and I kept looking for more information. And one thing I stumbled on, maybe by accident, was the hormones that motivate animals. And I was shocked that they're the same as the hormones that create good feelings in people. I'll tell you why 45, but I really don't want to, make a big deal about the number. But I was in a yoga class and they told me to fold your arms and now look at which arm is on top and now try to do it the opposite way, and it's so hard and that you can't do it. I can do it now because I did it. Or put your thumb, fold your hands and then try to put the other thumb on top. And they said it takes 45 days to do it the opposite way because the grooves in your brain make one way natural. And you have to keep trying to do it another way. And I really like that because it suggests that you're not doing anything wrong. It's just chance that you learned it the other way, and you have the power to learn it a new way just by repetition. So I really like that. So for people who like 21 days, what I say is do it 21 days twice. So it is the irony of modern life that when we face less immediate threat, that then we feel so stressed. So it is useful to know that, and all of my books explain this, that same chemical that causes an animal to feel like it's about to be eaten is the same chemical that causes stress. So the way our brain is designed to work is to focus on staying alive, surviving, meeting immediate needs of getting food and finding safety. Now, in the modern world, it's easier to get food and safety. So when you're not hungry and you're not cold, your brain looks harder to find a threat because that's the job it's designed to do. So if I'm not immediately threatened, I look next week, next year, next month, and I go home and I say, is that person mad at me? Is that person mad at me? And the safety in the animal world comes from a herd. So you're surrounded by a herd. But in the modern world, we want our independence. So we don't have that constant feeling of being surrounded by a herd. So we're like, where's my herd? Where's my herd? So that's just a short explanation. So the answer is to build a new pathway that shifts your focus from an unhappy loop to a happy loop. And all of my books explain this with slightly different focus. And we know that building a new loop takes 45 days, but first you have to design the loop. So that's the challenge, because people say, I can't help it if everyone is treating me this way, so what loop do you expect me to design? And that's what my books explain. You want to design a new pathway that stimulates the happy chemicals in a way that would make sense to an animal. I'm not saying to act like an animal, but your animal brain controls the happy chemicals. So you have to make peace between your human verbal brain and your mammalian brain in order to stimulate the chemicals, and we can talk about that. But the answer is, once you come up with this new way of stimulating them, design something very specific and repeat it. So an example would be to say, I did a good job, I will get a reward in the long run, but I can't expect the whole world to applaud me every minute of every day. That would be an example. And you can say that to yourself 3 times a day for 45 days. So, expectations means anticipating the future. So animals don't anticipate the future. That's the big difference. So the human cortex has 2 major jobs. So it can abstract, and that means language is abstract, and anticipating the future is abstract, because when you anticipate the future, it's something you can't touch. So that ability to anticipate has freed us from living in constant hunger. In the animal world, you spend all your time looking for food, looking for protection from predators. But in the modern world, because we anticipate our future needs, we have solved some of them. And just the simplest example is that animals, their babies get eaten by predators. Sometimes they watch their baby get eaten alive. But humans, our babies never get eaten alive because we have learned to protect our babies from predators. So that's the positive side of anticipating threats. And yet we all know that the negative side is that when I have a baby, a child, and it's safe, then I think, oh, but it might not be safe tomorrow. It might not be safe next year. My grandchildren might not be safe 100 years from now. So we can never stop looking for potential threats, because that's the brain, the job our brain evolved to do. So what we can do, it's good to anticipate, but what I think about is like putting a new pair of glasses to say, okay, I'm anticipating bad, but I can also see the positive, because it's so hard to see the positive. You don't grow up seeing the positive. Most people's parents don't teach them to see the positive. So you want to be able to put on your positive glasses, and at first you may feel like you're lying to yourself. You don't even believe the positive things you tell yourself. So what I explain in the books is, if you can tell yourself something positive for 3 minutes a day, for 1 minute, 3 times a day, you can be negative the rest of the day, and just for 1 minute, think of something positive and repeat it to yourself. Even if you think you have nothing positive, other people are mean to you, and you only see your weaknesses, that you can find something positive and repeat it, and after 45 days, you will start to believe it. So many people think that a bad mood, either they can't do anything, or that, as you say, they have to chase happy chemicals. But as we all know, when people chase happy chemicals, they often get a bad habit. So it's so easy to see these bad habits in other people, and we all know what all the famous bad habits are, and we all know that they may work in the short run, but in the long run, these bad habits often cause you more bad mood. So it's more important to understand how your happy chemicals are meant to work, and then you can give yourself permission to have a bad mood for a few minutes, and I'll explain how, so that instead of chasing happy chemicals, you can just relax and accept. And what I say is that it's, you know, when you drive a car and there's forward and there's reverse and there's neutral. So this is a new idea to say, it's not a bad mood, I'm just in neutral, okay? So the reason is, when your happy chemicals turn on, they have a job to do. And when the job is over, and my books explain all the job, and we can talk about it, when the job is over, it goes down. But that down is not a crisis, it's not a problem, it doesn't mean you did anything wrong, and it doesn't mean there's something wrong with the world. It just means that this spurt is over, and now you're in neutral, and now you're waiting to make a decision about the next place to invest your energy. Because that's how an animal survives, by constantly choosing, is this the best place to invest my energy, or here? So what should I do next? So what I say in my books is the solution is to do nothing. because if I do nothing, then that will teach my brain that nothing terrible happens when I just stop. And you will be so happy to have a rest instead of feeling like you constantly have to run after something. And yes, you can run after happy feelings, but you can choose them more carefully, and you can choose them in new ways instead of just automatically running after them when you're in a bad mood and you're repeating a bad habit. Okay, so the important thing is that mammals are constantly comparing themselves to others. And we are constantly comparing ourselves to others with our mammal brain. And we're not consciously deciding to do it. And it's easy to see how other people do it, and it's sometimes harder to notice in yourself. And not only do we constantly compare ourselves to others, but we have a very strong reaction when we compare. Because in the animal world, your social position has a big impact on your opportunity to spread your genes, okay? And that's a simple word, and you understand what that means. And so in social media, we see lots of social comparison that triggers all of those feelings. Now, in your online life, you're always trying to have the good feeling of social comparison and avoid the bad feeling of social comparison. So when you have it in your offline life and you have frustration, many people retreat to online life, but then they get frustrated in the online world, and now the current popular theme is that social media is the cause of all of our frustration. But we all know that if you just turn it off, that doesn't make you instantly happy either. So that's why, the theme of all of my books is to understand how we're creating these ups and downs ourselves so that we can be a little more at peace with our impulses, even though they're very hard to control. So this is a very big issue. A very, very good question. I really appreciate that. Okay, I appreciate it because so many people only want to see the happy side of the happy chemicals, but every one of them has a downside, which I explain in my books, and it would take so long, and I often have to convince people that there's an unhappy side, so I'm so glad you get that. So oxytocin is the chemical that maybe people have heard less about. So maybe you've heard a lot about dopamine, serotonin, and endorphin because they all have very popular medical applications and drug applications. And oxytocin, although it's not as common, it has a fan club because the people who do know about it, they call it the love hormone or the cuddle chemical or the bonding hormone. So it's a chemical that makes us feel good when we have a social group, when we have acceptance and belonging. And we have different expressions, but we all know that feeling of I really want to be with a group, because your animal brain feels safer when you're with a group, and instead of looking for a predator all the time, you can relax a little bit. And that feels so good that sometimes people will do bad things in order to be with a group. And the more you're afraid to be alone, the more you will do bad things to be with a group. And we can all think of so many examples of bad things people do to not be alone. And we all make different choices about this, because whatever you learned when you were under age 8 and during puberty of, oh, so this is what people do in order to have that safe feeling. Now, the simple word for that safe feeling that I use to put it in a positive context is trust. I would call that also serotonin. So very good question. So they're related. So let me explain the difference between the two of them. So as I mentioned, animals spend most of their time looking for food because they don't have a refrigerator, they don't have money, they don't have food processing, so they're always looking for food. So there's two different feelings involved. Dopamine is the feeling of I'm hungry, I look around and I say, oh, there's something I can eat. And I feel excited. I say, I found something and I can get it. So there are two different feelings. So one is I see something, that's opportunity. It meets my needs. That's my awareness of my unmet needs and my confidence in my skills. So a monkey has to do a lot of work to get to it. So it's all those things together. And when I say that to myself, that's a great feeling of dopamine. But I still don't have the food in my belly, so I have to do a lot of work to get to it. So dopamine releases energy that makes me take that next step. And when I see that I'm closer, then I get more dopamine and I have more good feelings. Now, sometimes we get frustration, like we try to get to something and we fail. So in animals, like a lion runs toward a gazelle and then the gazelle gets away. So often we seek a reward and we can't get it. But each time we get a little bit closer, that's the good feeling of dopamine. Closer, closer, more, more, more. And that's why if you are trying to achieve a goal, whether it's in your career or in a romantic relationship or in an athletic goal, or the most popular ones, then people get dopamine more, 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 more. But once you get that goal, the dopamine stops and then you don't get any more until you have a new goal. And so that's the frustration of life. But that's a completely different problem from, let's imagine I'm a monkey, I do this hard work, and I get this piece of fruit, and I'm right there, and I'm just about to get it, and I'm so hungry, and then a bigger monkey is there, and the bigger monkey, their hand comes, and they're about to get it, and I know that if I try to take this food, the bigger monkey will bite me and claw me, and every little monkey has had that experience because big monkeys steal food from smaller monkeys. And the pain builds a cortisol pathway that says, I would rather be hungry than to have my flesh ripped open by a bigger monkey. So this is the serotonin problem. So a monkey will avoid an opportunity when it knows that a bigger monkey is there. And it will look around for a piece of fruit where there's no bigger monkey. So this is like, you can imagine, like a job where you say, that's a job I want, but I know that there's a bigger monkey in my company that is going to try to take that job. So I have to look around for a job where I feel like I'm the bigger monkey. And that's serotonin, is that feeling where I look around and I say, I have confidence in my own skills. I am bigger, I am big enough to get that. So adrenaline is the first one that was really popular. Adrenaline is a feeling of excitement, and it is not, the important thing is it's not positive or negative. So for example, when you drive your car, you have gas that makes you go faster, but it doesn't tell you whether you go forward or backward. So we need both. We need to know when something is good, happy chemical, we go forward. When something is bad, unhappy chemical, we go backward. But adrenaline says, this is an emergency. So then we go forward fast or we go backward fast. So that's the simple explanation. And then why people use it as a synonym for all the others is just because it is an excited feeling and because it was understood earlier. So people use it for anything you feel excited about. Endorphin is the same chemical as morphine, which means heroin or opioid. So hopefully we understand that we are not meant to be having these chemicals in us all the time. They create a very good feeling only when you're in pain, because their job is to mask pain so that you can take an action to protect yourself when you're injured. Why do people use endorphin as a synonym for all the others? Because it was the next one to be discovered, and it was the first happy one to be discovered, and it is the one people think they have control over in a way that's called runner's high. So when people run and they get exercise, they think they're getting a high, and that's a popular way to feel good. And I don't agree with it, so I'll explain why. First, your body only produces it when you run to the point of pain. You don't get endorphin high every time you run, only if you run to the point of pain. Now, what's going to happen to you in the long run if you create pain every day? And we all know that there are other bad habits people have to create pain to get endorphin. It's very bad in the long run. The next thing is your brain habituates, which means you have to create more and more pain to get the good feeling. It's a disaster. It's a terrible way to feel good. Okay, so most of the time we're using the pathways we built when we were young, because every brain uses the pathways it has, and the electricity in your brain flows like water in a storm. So when it rains and you see the water just flows wherever there's a channel. So mindfulness and meditation teaches you to stop the flow into the old channels, but it does not create new channels. So that's why I don't think it's enough. And that's, again, people think meditation is the way to happiness, and then if they do it and they're not happy, they just think more and more meditation, to the point where they're cutting themselves off from life. And I don't think that's healthy at all. And I don't think more meditation is the answer. So I think it's step one to help train yourself to know that you have the power to stop flowing into that old channel, but you have to build a new channel. Obviously, it's not possible. No baby, no child, no teenager can possibly have a perfect formative experience that exactly prepares them for their future decisions. So everybody has to retrain themselves, and everybody finds it a little painful. Now, you make it worse if you tell yourself that other people are having this easy life and other people got a good childhood and are just effortlessly flowing, and I have all the hard times. So you get it. Thank you. I know this is popular today, and people are telling old people to do this, but then there's the opposite view. Do you know what a crossword puzzle is? Yes, so some people are telling old people to do crossword puzzles, and other people are saying, well, that will make you better at doing crossword puzzles, but it won't make you better at everything else. So my advice is to do something you like, because the liking stimulates the chemicals, and the chemicals are like paving on your pathways, okay? The other thing is, I know it's hard to keep your memory when you're older, but really after age 20, we all have a dip in myelin. So it really, you know, gets harder for everyone. The way I think about it is, when you're young, you build the trunk of your tree of neurons and you build big branches. Then when you're older, you can build new leaves. So we can always build new leaves, and that's what we're focusing on. But try to do it in the context of something you like. this is a very complicated thing, and it's so important. Some people, when they read about the hormones, they may think, I'm a kind of a dopamine person because I love to always run after a new goal. And other people think, I'm a serotonin person because I like to compete. And other people may think, I'm an oxytocin person because I like to always be with friends and have a sense of belonging. Now the question is, if you want to build a new habit and be happier, the first thing most people do is they try to do the thing they're already good at. But actually, to try a new one that you're not already good at is probably, it's going to feel better. Okay, so how can you stop bad habits and get good new habits? So the answer is always that you have to create a new habit to substitute for your old habit. So the old habit is a pathway in your brain, and it will always be there, but it's like if you have a highway that you're building a new highway, and then you have to build a connector to get to the new highway. So I'm on the new highway and I'm taking the exit, so I have to build both. I have to build the exit and the new highway. So the new highway is what new habit do I want to have? So I'll give you my example of a healthy new habit is to listen to comedy. So put some comedy on your phone and listen. So every time you feel like having a cigarette or crying or eating junk, you listen to comedy and walk in a place that you enjoy. Now, how to build the highway from the old habit to the new habit is to be honest with yourself about when do you do the old habit. So that's what many people call a trigger. So when do you go for a cigarette? When do you go for that bad habit? But my opinion is people do it when they're tired and they haven't learned. When you're tired, what you really want to do is relax, but you don't give yourself permission to relax, or you don't know a healthy way to relax, so you only have, so like I think I have to keep working, or I'm angry and I'm trying to hold in my anger. So you need to give yourself something that feels good some of the time. Like even if it's watching junk television or reading a junk book, some of the time you have to give yourself a treat, but a healthy treat. Yes, and yes, it's possible to manage happiness hormones, and I learned how to say it in Russian because I wanted to say one thing that's important in Russian, and I'm going to try not to look. So, just because it's so hard to look for the words. Okay, Vymastya, I can't even remember. Uplavle, Garmonia счастья. I'm so needing practice.